So Alexander Ovechkin is not Wayne Gretzky. I mean, this is truly riveting takes here at 98.5, the Sports Hub in Boston. And let's be honest, Mario here has better takes than Felger and Mazz.
We all know who the true God is.
Anybody that really give this conversation any merit is just stupid, and you're just downgrading Ovechkin. Sports radio stupidity aside, let's just kind of call it what it is. To sit here and try to compare Ovechkin and Gretzky is comparing apples and oranges. Two different styles of player. And while, yes, Gretzky scored a lot of goals, he was more of a facilitator. He played in a different era. Ovechkin, in a difficult era to score against goaltenders, he was one of the best we've ever seen. And you could technically argue if he was in Gretzky's era, maybe he scores 1,000 by this point in time. But let's get right into the video and see what the bumbling duo have to say.
And I know that, you're not to put words in your mouth, but your point, obviously, this guy should not be mentioned in the same breath as Wayne Gretzky. And I don't. I'm just telling you purely on the goal scoring record. There aren't many records in sports that mean much to me. I'm not sure there ever were, but this is kind of one of them.
So, again, I think the whole premise of even comparing Gretzky and Ovechkin is silly in the first place. Different eras, different type of game. I know we like to do like, oh, well, Gretzky had this many goals and now Ovechkin is the #1 of all time. It's like, to me, yeah, Gretzky is still the GOAT. I mean, it's kind of hard to refute that. You could argue some players like Mario Lemieux, if his career wasn't shortened due to a lot of his battles with health, he would be in that conversation, I think, with more people. But yeah, you can say Gretzky's the great one. But to act like Ovechkin isn't the upper echelon of Hall of Famers, I think it's a little bit silly.
I say kind of, it is. So, the guy who scored the most goals in the history of professional hockey, that's a legit stat. That's a legit title to own. Alexander Ovechkin's played 20 years and basically averaged 50 goals a year. Do you know he's only scored 60 once?
Is that right?
He got 65 in his third or fourth year in the league, I think it was.
So while he is right about Ovechkin only scoring 65 goals once in his career, there could have been a season, I think it was 1920, that he could have had 60 if he played a full 82. He would have been around that stratosphere. But I will say, that many 50-goal seasons, like Mazz is saying, is just incredible. I mean, just how productive Ovechkin has stayed throughout the most part in his career, that's hard to do.
Other than that, he's basically pumped out 45 to 50 every year.
Yep.
Ballpark. There were some 30s in there, but, again, and that's exactly who he is as a player. He's pretty much guaranteed goals. Now, is he a good two-way player? No. Does he set other people up? No. Does he play shorthanded? No. But as far as putting the puck in the net, he is one of the all-time greats and now the greatest, based purely on numbers, in the history of the sport.
So, okay. Is Alexander Ovechkin Gretzky's playmaking? No. Is he Adam Oates? No. Nobody ever claimed him to be that, though. That's not why he got paid so much money and why he was a superstar in the league for such a long time. So, playmaking ability, yeah, it's not elite, but I'm not going to sit here and say it's terrible either. I would also argue, as for the defensive acumen conversation when it comes to Ovechkin, Ovechkin was willing to deal out hits and be physical that a lot of superstars are just not willing to make that sacrifice due to the possibility of getting injured. And for the most part, Ovechkin stayed relatively healthy throughout his career. So he's been blessed with, I think, good genetics and just some really good luck. But at the same point in time, to say that defensively he's a complete liability, I mean, sure. Earlier in his career, he probably would have benefited from having a guy like Trotz earlier on to kind of make him more responsible in the 200-foot game. I think he was enabled a bit in Washington during the early part of his career because outside of Ovechkin, I mean, really, who did they have? You could argue, I mean, they had Backstrom and some nice players, but Ovechkin was the main attraction, and they didn't want to upset their golden goose, which I could understand to a degree. While I'm not going to give Ovechkin a complete pass, I do blame the Capitals organization more regarding that because when Ovechkin was younger and didn't have as much say as he does now, if they brought in the right coach to kind of have him play a certain system, maybe you get the best version of Ovi. Or maybe it just kind of took him time to understand that, yeah, I need to play a 200-foot game. I mean, under Trotz, that's when you really saw Ovi buy into a system. And due to buying into that system, he was able to win the greatest trophy in all of sports.
Watching it, to me, you get that feeling when you see a guy do something that means something and there's a value to it. You get sort of like the hair on your neck stands up for an instant, and I felt that way watching this highlight.
Yeah, so because the moment in of itself was really cool. Like, I didn't want him to break it, but it was a snipe on the power play, and then he dives like a slip and slide. Like, it was a no-joke goal. It was pretty awesome. And did you know he had never scored on Sorokin?
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so that part of it, too, I thought was kind of neat. Like, he had never scored on Ilya Sorokin, the Islanders goalie. So going into it, too, like I was talking about this a bit on Saturday with Alex Barth, like the price, the get-in price was like $1,000. Like,
yeah.
Good luck. You hope if you're paying that kind of money, he's actually going to score. Otherwise, you're getting boned to watch the stupid Islanders.
I mean, listen, I think that was a fascinating story regarding like him not scoring on Sorokin, that being the first goal against Sorokin where he breaks the record. I mean, if I am Sorokin, I'm like, I can kind of hang my cap on. I mean, yeah, that's the first goal I let up on him. I kept him off the scoreboard, and I was kind of difficult for Ovechkin, but weird comment there. Didn't want him to break it. That's kind of interesting, but yeah, I mean, I think Ovi's just tremendous.
But he did it. It was cool in the moment. The Gretzky part of it's neat, too. He kept going, and he felt the need to pay it forward because Gordie Howe was there when he passed him, and this is why he wanted to show up for that. So, again, I didn't want him to break Gretzky's record, but, in a vacuum that day, the moment in of itself was pretty cool.
So I've been rooting against it for years, but I've come to accept it, obviously, in the last couple months when it was obvious it was going to happen. I was rooting against it because I'm a Gretzky-era hockey fan, and he's the greatest player I've ever seen, and so I'm just sort of loyal to that. And I don't think Ovechkin can hold his jock as an all-around offensive player, and he can't. But you know what? No one is claiming that he does.
Mm-hmm.
Making a comment about, or should say, video that he's not comparable to Gretzky. Again, Gretzky had the whole package. He did. He had the whole package, playmaking ability. He could score at will, but I mean, you've even had Gretzky come out and say that today's era, it's a lot more difficult to score. It is. I mean, you can have the conversation of Ovechkin and Crosby. Who do you think the better player is? It's why I don't like to get into these comparisons with different eras, because the game has changed so significantly. I mean, if you dropped Ovechkin in the era of Gretzky, in the 80s and the 90s, where the goaltending, where I'm not saying there wasn't great goalies, but, let's be honest, a little bit easier to score due to the technology. What would he score? Would Ovechkin score more than Gretzky? But we don't know. There's just so many different variables in this, and that's why I think the whole comparison of eras, I think, as a whole, is just a bit silly. But to say that can't even hold his jock, I mean, the guy's going to end up with 900-plus goals, and if he plays a couple more seasons, he could flirt with maybe around 1,000 goals in NHL career, which is just absolutely ridiculous. I just don't like the downplaying of Ovechkin's greatness. You can say Gretzky is a better overall player, but to act like Ovi is just a pylon or something of that nature is nowhere near worth even having the conversation, I think it's a little bit disrespectful.
It's not like these yahoos now who say LeBron greater than Michael Jordan.
Yeah, right.
Like, we're not doing that idiocy. Ovechkin greater than Gretzky. I've never heard that. No one's claiming that, and no one should claim that. And so, okay, that makes it a little more palatable for me. And really what makes it palatable for me as a Gretzky fan is that it's totally legit. It's not like he's hanging on past the age he should be playing and just in the game so he can set the record, and otherwise it's kind of useless. He has 42 goals.
It's unreal.
He's fourth in the league in goals. So he's still a premier goal scorer in the National Hockey League.
So, and this is another thing I would say regarding this. Ovechkin, yeah, sure, no one's saying he's greater than Wayne Gretzky. I really haven't heard much of that conversation. Actually, going into this, I thought this was going to be them bitching about that, which is, I'm pleasantly surprised that's not the case. That being said, again, Ovechkin is doing this in an era where it's a lot more difficult to score. And I would also argue, when you really look at things, the fact that he's doing this at the age of 39 years old and having a 40-goal season, if he didn't get injured, he would have had a potential 50-goal season. It's just downright impressive. And kind of pulling it up here on the phone, and this is no slight about Gretzky and his ability, because even when he wasn't scoring a lot of goals towards the end of his career, he was getting a lot of apples. But his last year in the NHL, 98-99, he had 9 goals. Still had 62 points. I mean, incredible season. Season before that, 23, then 25, then 15-8. So you had 23 with the Kings. I mean, he was still scoring decently. Not to, pretend that he wasn't still contributing, because even those years, 81 points, 97, 90, 62 points since last year, he was still an extremely productive player. That being said, you could argue that Gretzky, he wasn't the same guy towards the end of his career, which Ovechkin has been at his point in his career. 40-plus goals, that's impressive. When Gretzky was kind of winding down, sure, he had that phenomenal playmaking ability, but he didn't have that same goal-scoring prowess. I'm just, again, not knocking the greatest player of all time when it comes to the NHL, but I'm just being honest. What we're seeing with what Ovechkin is doing is absolutely insane, because usually when you reach this age, you're not the same guy, just because of father time and the diminishing. And we thought that was going to be the case last year. We thought that was going to be the situation. Like, oh, crap. Age is starting to kick in, but solid second half of the season where he scores 30-plus, and this year he's just been phenomenal. One of the reasons why the Washington Capitals are one of the best teams in all of the NHL.
And as we talked about late last week, his 895 were harder earned than Gretzky's 894. It is harder to score in today's NHL. Oddly enough, so I did a deeper dive on this. So The Ringer had a good story on it, pretty much hitting on everything I brought up last week about the era. It is actually easier to score now in the NHL than it was at the end of Gretzky's career. So the tail end of Gretzky's career, it got real grindy. And
Okay. Again, I'm not blaming... I'm not saying Gretzky's not great, but if he's saying 98, 99, 97, 98, 96, 90... towards the back end of his career, where it did become difficult with the trap. The New Jersey Devils were famous for that, and just kind of the physical style of play, where there's a lot of crutching and grabbing. There was the 2-line pass, which slowed down the game. Yeah, you could make that argument, but that's not where Gretzky scored the majority of his goals. It's just not. Last year, 9 goals, and then the 2 years prior to that, 23, 25, still respectable numbers, but is it 40 plus towards the twilight of his career? It's not.
Beginning of Ovechkin's career, it was really grindy. But in the last 3 or 4 years, there are more goals scored in the NHL than there were in Gretzky's last 3 to 4 years. So it's, as I read in this story, let's see, it took 18 years for...
and I'm sorry for pausing this so much. The original video will be linked down below. Just because of Felger's point here, right? If he's going to say that the beginning of Ovechkin's career was extremely grindy, he scored 52 goals in his first year, 46 in his second, and then that one lone 60-plus goal season, 65 goals, happened in his third year. So that kind of throws that whole argument out the window. If it was just as grindy, if that's what you want to say. Looking at his first 5 years, 52 goals, 46 goals, 65, 56, 50. That's impressive production. And kind of throws that whole, Gretzky had to do it in a tougher era towards the end of his career. I'm like, well, he didn't score the majority goals of that. And then if you're going to say earlier in Ovi's career, you'll credit that, it was a little bit more grinding and more difficult to score on. He's still scoring 50-plus goals, and most of them, you get what I'm trying to say?
18 years for it to be as easy to score for Ovechkin in the relative to the league as it was for Gretzky, but we're here. But either way, for the balance of that time, it was much harder to score in Ovechkin's time than Gretzky's time. Not even close.
Yeah.
And Ovechkin did it in the exact same number of games. Do you know that?
Isn't that unbelievable? That is wild.
They have the exact. So Gretzky set the record or scored his final goal at age 38 in his 20th NHL season, and he played 1,487 games. Ovechkin, 1,487 games on a dime.
Isn't that crazy?
He's 39, not 38, but only because they lost a year to the lockout. He was drafted the lockout year, and they lost the year.
That's true.
So that's the only reason he's a year older.
Yep.
It was both their 20th NHL season and both in game 1487.
Isn't that incredible?
So it's not like Ovechkin sucks. He shouldn't be playing. He's just there to set a record. No, he's got one of the best teams in hockey. He's the fourth leading scorer in the league. And for about 90% of his career, it was much harder to score than it was during Gretzky's era. It's legit. I can't take anything away from it.
Oh, no, totally legit.
Okay, he's got a ton of power play goals, ton of empty net goals. I hate, I don't love that, but that doesn't, to me, outweigh how easy it was to score for some of Gretzky's years. In the early 80s, it was, it's a whole different game.
Yeah, again.
So, I'll kind of wrap it up here and kind of give my closing thoughts here. Again, Ovechkin, what he's been able to do is historic. And I think this is the honest-to-God conversation we can have. He's going to be the first guy to ever score 900. And if he plays a couple more seasons, he could flirt around 1,000, and maybe he sticks around for a bit. It's an option. Ovechkin has proven that when he dedicates himself to the game and he buys in and he has the proper teammates around him, he can still be an elite level goal scorer. And if I'm the Washington Capitals, I would try to just keep doing what they're doing. And you could see Ovi flirt with, I think, 950 plus. I think 1,000 would be a lot to ask, but just imagine if Ovi hangs around where he's still productive. Maybe he's not scoring 40 goals anymore, but maybe he's scoring 25 plus. If he's still productive and he could flirt with 1,000, I mean, why the hell wouldn't you want to see that? It just would be historic. And as for the conversation between Wayne Gretzky and Alexander Ovechkin, again, not many people are saying that, but it's something you can't deny here. Ovechkin is the greatest goal scorer we have ever seen. He scored all these goals in a far more difficult era to score. The goaltending was a lot better. And sure, you can credit the stick technology as improvement, but as for the power play goals, I mean, I'm not going to blame Ovechkin for capitalizing on what most teams should capitalize. Empty net goals, I mean, sure, I'd really have to look at that historically before I really made too much of a comment in comparison of his empty net goals versus others. But when it's all said and done, he's going to finish his career with 900 plus goals. I don't even know how you can argue about him not being the greatest goal scorer we've ever seen. And I think he deserves a little bit more respect in the GOAT conversation. Do I think personally he's my GOAT? No, I wouldn't say that for the NHL. But let's not just act like the guy is just nothing, right? That he's just some guy that borderline Hall of Famer that made it. What Ovechkin has been able to do throughout his career, consistently scoring 50-plus goals throughout so many damn seasons, is incredible. And thinking at the age of 39, if he doesn't get injured, he would have another 50-goal year. This type of production in a player's twilight of their career, we just really don't see. I mean, Gordie Howe, last time we saw a guy towards the end of his career still be just absolutely brilliant. And I mean, even Wayne Gretzky, he didn't have the goal-scoring prowess, but he still was a point machine as well. But let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. What you think of the whole Ovi versus Gretzky conversation from 98.5 The Sports Hub. I'd like to know your thoughts. See you in the next one.